Greetings, everyone. This is Trey Chadlow. I'm here on this 19th day of March, 2018. I'm here with my old friend, FP, Floyd FP. We had a little run-in the other day on, I guess I did another hangout, and I think I must have posted in G+, and you got it, and you made some comments, and so I invited you to do another hangout. So here we are. So thank you, Floyd, for coming, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was from your hangout with Joshua. I forget his last name.
Olson.
He was a presuppositionalist, and you were going over things with him. And I made comments more towards his position than yours, but I think I said something that you disagreed with, and you wanted to talk about that. So here we are.
Okay. How have you been? You doing okay?
Yeah, I've been real busy with work, so I haven't had time to do this lately, but it's a good distraction to do this.
Okay, cool.
I think it's like the third hangout we've had, I think.
At least. I mean, I linked to the ones that I could find quickly on the in the whatever the details section on this video. So we may have, I'm sure we've been in hangouts together too that may be recorded or something. But yeah, just mainly two of us, two, maybe three, I think, something like that. Anyway, why don't we go ahead and jump in? Now, you had, I guess you just now said that you had some more problems with or questions with Josh than you did with me. But I guess because on the first comment that I put on there, which I think was the second comment that you made, well, actually, maybe on the first one, because Josh and I both agreed that we could use the reductio ad absurdum argumentation and the transcendental argument as well. But the question I have with Josh and have a problem with is his use of his speaking of his order of epistemology as presuppositionalism is imprecise and quite sloppy. So, but when you talk back to using the actual methodologies of not forcing people to presuppose, but just basically doing a reductio ad absurdum inquiry, we both are the same way and do the same thing. So I think that your question to him would be equally applicable to me. So you said, how exactly is a non-Christian borrowing from the Christian worldview what is required that only Christianity provides? And then in parentheses, you said, I've demonstrated, I don't know how many, oh, no, that's what I said. I've demonstrated, I don't know how many times that I'm not a presuppositionalist. So apparently you weren't referring to me with that comment.
Right. Yeah, so I guess in regards to the transcendental argument, a transcendental argument, it's my understanding that the transcendental argument, you're arguing that X is required for Y. So if Y exists, X is necessary for that thing to come about. Right. So, so for the presuppositionalist, the Christian God, the triune Christian God of Protestant Scripture, is a necessary being for anything you want to. You need to account for the universe, mathematics, morality, use of science, induction, the principles of logic and everything, and that's what I question. Why? Perhaps the best you can say is the Christian God is sufficient for those things. That it could be a potential candidate for some of those things. I don't think the Christian God could be a potential candidate, but the presuppositionist goes a step farther. They're saying only the Christian God can account for everything. Any other worldview fails.
Okay, can you give me an example of another worldview that would fulfill the criterion necessary to give us the world that we have?
Well, you can go to Platonism. Why not the Jewish worldview? You have the same God; he's just not triune.
Right. And so, how do you have relationality
or any other worldview that just has an entity regardless of what that entity is, that has the ability to create universes.
Right. Well, and I started to answer it. The reason you got to have a triune God is because if in fact, say, for example, in Judaism, those that, although I think the Trinity or the plurality within the Godhead is certainly strongly alluded to in the Old Testament. But if you wanted to say that there's only one God, say in Islam or in what some people interpret Judaism to have, how is it that you can have the reality of relationality in this world in which we have, when in fact the God who's supposed to be self-existent is dependent upon his creation in order to have that attribute of relationality? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, why is relationality necessary?
Well, does relationality exist?
Well, whenever you have two beings, you have some sort of relation, right?
Okay, so we're relating to each other right now, right?
Right.
Okay, so if God ad intra, as he relates to himself, is unipersonal, how is it that he can be relational without being dependent upon his creation in order to have that attribute? And therefore, there you go for self-existence, even in simplicity as well.
Well, again, we're going back to why is having a relationship necessary? Wait, imagine a universe. Imagine a universe with one rock in it, and the only thing that exists in that universe is a rock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now why is that problematic? How does that lead to absurdity?
Well, there's no relationality in that rock, right?
Well, perhaps you can relate to itself, but that's not much of a relationship.
Well, Floyd, we're not talking about hypotheticals. We're talking about the world in which we live right now, and we're extrapolating and logically deducing from that, right?
Right. Okay. So in this world, we experience different entities. We experience different relationships.
Right. And the concept of relationality is real, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So how do you justify relationality in a God who's supposed to be self-existent, who is dependent in order to have that concept, which we see in ourselves?
So, well, what's the problem with a God being in relation to his creation? Why is that problematic?
Because the concept that he has, his attribute of relationality, is not it's not a part of him. It's not a concept that he has as he is. He is dependent for it, but he cannot be dependent for anything by definition.
What do you mean by definition? By whose definition?
If he is, this drives me nuts. And I just saw the page that you guys made. And that's not the first time that whoever, I don't know if it was some guys made the page about me, that I'm a fool and all that stuff for the great debate community, little wiki page or whatever. But it's so funny. You guys think you're so smart, and it's like, oh my gosh, trying to explain this stuff, I over and over and over, and I go with it, and it's like you just can't get it. If you're dependent for the reality of relationality, then it's not self-existent. It's not a part of who you are, because you have to depend upon that which you made in order to make it, and therefore you're not self-existent for that property.
So you don't have a relationship with your God.
What does that have to do with the conversation right now?
Well, we're talking about relationships, right?
Do you know do you even know what I'm explaining at all?
Do you have a relationship with your God?
Yes, like I'm having a relationship with you. You already conceded that there's such a thing as relationality.
Yes.
Okay. And I explained to you how God must have more, at least bipersonal or biune, in order to have the relationality be a real thing. Because if he's self-existent, then he cannot be dependent for anything, because when you're dependent on something, you're no longer self-existent. So he must, as he is, not as he relates to the universe, as his created universe, but as he relates to himself, he cannot have that property of relationality. He is dependent for that upon his creation. Therefore, he's not self-existent.
So how are you defining self-existent as? I mean,
not dependent on anything else for anything that it has. It is purely self-existent. It's not.
He's not dependent on anything else for his existence, right? Now, again, why are we back to why is it necessary for God or anything really to have a relationship? It could be something you desire.
Does relationality exist, Floyd?
Well, we already answered that. We're having a
Okay,
relationship right
so
now.
it's a real thing, right?
Right.
Now, if God is unipersonal, how can relationality be something that he has and he's not dependent upon it for it to exist if relationality is real?
Well, he wouldn't have a relationship with anything else until something else existed.
Okay, so relationality is not something God possesses apart from creation, right?
Yeah, I don't see why it's necessary.
Okay, then relationality is not a real attribute, or God is not self-existent if he's dependent upon the universe that he created in order to have that property.
It seems like you're stuck on that everything that exists must always exist. That's why it seems like all your arguments are centered around that one view that nothing new can come about. That okay, for there to be relationships now, there must have been relationships at all time. Or if intentionality exists now, there must have been intentionality at all times, and so forth. It seems like all your arguments center around that whatever exists must have always existed, that nothing new can come about. I mean, does that sound right?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I am saying if there is a property that really exists in this world in which we have, that property cannot be bestowed upon something which does not have that property itself.
Why can't a new relation, a new property come about from changing circumstances?
Is that property dependent upon the one that gives it its being in a contingent sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, relationships are purely dependent on the beings that it represents. Just like a left side and a right side. Rightness and leftness is dependent on some sort of object,
relationship,
or above and below. Those are all relationships, right?
Right, and those are material relationships.
Right.
So they're locational, so they're not exactly the same thing. But
right.
I'm speaking of properties that exist within us, cannot be there unless it is given to us because we are dependent. And God doesn't have it if he's monopersonal.
Why does he need to have it? Why is it necessary?
Because we received it. He had to have it in order to give it. You know what I mean? God doesn't give that which he does not have.
No, if I have one piece of paper and I rip it in half, okay, now I have two pieces of paper, albeit both are half the size of the original. But now, one became two, so to speak. I don't see what the issue is here.
Okay, we're not talking about taking material things and splitting them in half. We're talking about the existence of a quality that had to be given to us.
Why did it have to be given? Relationships are given.
Relationality. It's a nature, a property of this universe in which we
don't things emerge from the entities themselves? So the minute someone comes up, it could be someone in front of me. The minute someone comes up behind me, okay, something new came about. Before I didn't have anything behind me, but now I do. Okay, but in the past that didn't happen. So here you have one God, right? And that could only thing that exists. And because he's bored or something, I'm not sure why a God has a desire to create when he's a perfect being anyway. But okay, then he starts popping things into existence. Okay, now all these things change. There was one entity, now there's multiple entities. Before there were no relationships, now there are relationships. So again, I don't see what the problem is.
Because you don't have a clue as to what you're talking about, Floyd.
Well,
you don't have a clue. Why don't I'm trying to? And you used to say the same thing.
Here's my question: why is having a relationship, or at the very beginning of creation, necessary?
It's not relationship at the very beginning of creation. It's if there is relationality now, then it had to be given to us by some entity which has that property. But if God is monopersonal, he cannot be relational. It's something that he's dependent upon his relationship,
So,
his creation to have.
So relationality is like a platonic form to you? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying it's a property that marks our reality that we have here now.
Well, it marks our reality because there's different entities in the universe. Right.
And
so if that was the case,
well, let me say this: love requires a lover and a loved. If in fact God is monopersonal, this is why the God of Islam, they do not have a concept of love. They never know when God's going to change his mind. But really, it's a sham, because the God of Islam cannot have that property of love, because he himself cannot. Before creation came, there was no such thing as love, because it requires a lover and a loved.
Okay,
it's a similar problem.
I don't see why it's a problem.
I know. I wonder if Ozzy might know, the great Ozzy, who is so tough that he's afraid to talk to me.
Okay, well, you bring up love. How about sex? Okay, if I was the only person in the universe, I would be spending all my time masturbating, and then I'm not satisfied with masturbating, so I create myself a woman, and now I get to have sex with her. Okay, well, obviously that's changed. And how is that any different? How is that analogy any different than God creating, the different things he created on each 6 days of creation?
Because you needed something. You are passible. Your idea of satisfaction is an accidental property to you. It is not who you are. Would that be you know what I'm saying? Happiness for you. When I look at Floyd FP, do I define you as happiness in and of yourself?
Well, it would be a state. It would be a state that I'm in sometimes.
Okay, so right, that's right.
And,
so
if you are not, by my nature, I'm capable of having that state.
That's right. So, is happiness for you? Is it essential to your instantiation of humanity? You as a human, are you necessarily defined by happiness?
No, I mean I could have lived a very short, miserable life.
Well, you move from state to happiness to sadness all the time. I mean, we all do. It's just who we are. So happiness for us is an accidental property. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, it's not necessary. It's something that just came about.
Well, no, it's something that is definitional to who we are, but it's not a part of our essence. So my hair is accidental to me. I can lose my hair and I'll still be Trey. Okay.
Right.
So if you have a self-existent being, that self-existent being must not be composite. It must be simple. In other words, it must have an identity with its attributes as well as its existence. Because if you have, say, for example, your essence, and then your existence is added to your essence, say I'm a human, and in my existence I have my humanity, but my existence in my humanity was given to me. Therefore, at the very base level, I'm a composite of existence and essence of the substantial form of humanity. Okay,
so I have those two things. All theologians accept divine simplicity.
Many today do not, and it is a result of Immanuel Kant. Nobody doubted it before the Enlightenment. Nobody, not anyone.
I think it's always been a controversial position.
No, it hasn't. No, simplicity was the baseline. First, you start out with incomprehensibility, and number two was always simplicity, historically speaking. So you got guys like William Lane Craig or even Alvin Plantinga. William Lane Craig, I don't believe he's a Christian. He is a partialist. He is a quite heretical. I know it'll freak people out, but you just look at it, and his definition of God, he denies simplicity and impassibility. And he's I would never recommend that man for anything, although I mean, you can argue sometimes pretty well.
I would argue that you're not a Christian because the God you believe in is not described in the Bible. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is not the God of Anselm, Aquinas, and Augustine.
How so?
Well, you just look, and this is what Blaise Pascal actually declared, which I agree with. You see this God changing states. You see this God having the potential into becoming the incarnate Christ who lowers himself. You see this God interacting and reacting to his creation and so forth. You see in the Old Testament, you see God as more of a Zeus type God who sends his angels down as scouts to report on his creation and so forth. You know, the God of the Bible is not the God of philosophers that you claim to believe in.
Okay, so the God of the Bible is a God who must communicate himself with accommodated language. Do you agree with that?
Well, he does. He does.
He has to, because there's no predication for God, right? He doesn't think with becoming. We can't even have a simple thought, because every thought that we have is a predication. When I say a dog has a tail, I've just added tailness to the dogness. That's what logic is for us. It's predication. It's becoming by definition. But God, as he is, he doesn't think in terms of becoming. So in order for him to reveal himself to us, he's got to take on some human characteristics and stoop down, if you will, and engage with us on a level by which we can understand, which is what Aquinas called analogical language. Because if we have no analogical language, we have no connection with God.
Well,
So,
again, I don't see that in the Bible at all. I think you're just implying.
Because you don't know the Bible were squat, Floyd.
Really?
Gosh, yeah.
All right, yeah, I've only been studying.
Does the Bible say that I, the Lord, do not change?
In one, but the Bible contradicts itself. It's full of contradictions.
Okay. Yes, you're such a genius. You see, you're the big Bible scholar. You know how these things work. So God does not use anthropomorphisms.
Oh, he doesn't say, like he describes Moses seeing his back parts.
That's right. And he separated the waters of the Red Sea with the blast of his nostrils. So he's got a big nose, right?
Well, or he enjoys the aroma of Noah's sacrifice after the flood. Why would a God enjoy the aroma of cooking flesh, as a sacrifice? Why do you need analogical language for that? Explain that to me.
I already did, because there's no such thing as predication with God. There is no becoming. So God must condescend and speak with language of becoming. So I said, God repented that he made man. You remember that?
Right, yeah.
Okay. So there is a language that he uses in order to communicate with. How is he going to communicate with us if he doesn't predicate?
Well, I would think he could communicate with us because we're made in his own image. So we
yes,
have
but we're not
something
self-existent, right?
Why do we need to be?
Because in order for him to, do you agree that there must be such things as incommunicable attributes?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, there's certainly a lot of mysteries in the universe. I mean,
God can share his eternity with us, Floyd?
I mean, I can't explain a thing to you about quantum physics, for example, because it's too confusing for me.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about attributes. How's God going to share his eternality to us created creatures? How does that work?
Well, God is loving, right? He's a loving father, and we can identify with that, right?
Yes, but can we experience God as he experiences reality?
Well, if Jesus says we should love each other as he has loved us, then can't we? And in fact, I think it was Romans, I would have to look it up. God shares his love with us. So why can't we understand that?
I didn't say we couldn't understand it, but I'm saying it must be.
So we can't. So we can't understand things about this God
with in an analogical, accommodated sense. Just like God's Shekinah glory in the Old Testament was an accommodated revelation. Just like God showing Moses his back parts, that was an accommodated, because it's not something that can be experienced by mankind in its fullness. Not only would it kill us, but we cannot understand it in fullness. We are not eternal creatures. We are not self-existent. We are not.
Do we need to understand everything in fullness?
No, we don't. That's the whole point.
Well, it's not necessary, right? We just need to know enough to survive, because we wish to survive.
Because he's made us that way, yeah.
Yeah, when we drive our car to work, we don't know everything about how that car operates, but we know enough to just to start the engine and drive ourselves to work.
Right. And so, yeah, and that's a kind of a different category, which I've always tried to make that point too, is there's such a thing as mystery, and mystery is not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean you can't, if you can't completely understand something, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
Just like you mentioned with quantum mechanics. I mean, we don't deny the fact that the subatomic particles because we don't understand it, or energy, or gravity, or really time, even. So many things we don't understand, fundamental things. So
right. So in the past, you denied there could be more than one God, but now you say, well, there has to be one God, but he has to have. Trying to say it correctly, within Trinitarianism,
more than one person within the Trinity, unity and Trinity.
Yeah, which is very much a paradox.
Right. It is.
Which violates the principle of transitivity of identity.
What is that? The principle of what?
Transitive. If A equals B, then B equals C. Is it transitivity? I think it's called. A equals B. If A equals B, B equals C, then A equals C. It's transitive, right, of identity. So the Trinity, the Father is God, the Son is God, the Holy Spirit is God, but the Father is not the Son is not the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is not the Father. Right. So you have A equals B, you have C equals B, you have D equals D. Equals B, but A does not equal C, C does not equal D, and so forth. It's contradictory.
Oh, you said it was paradox, and now you just said it's contradictory. Which is it?
Well, right. Well, it's both.
Paradox is not contradictory.
Well, I think it is contradictory.
Oh, okay. Well, you said
I'm being charitable when I say it's just a paradox.
Okay. Well, paradox is something that we don't understand. You got paradox, mystery, and contradiction.
Right.
And, the Trinity is not contradiction. It may be paradox and it may be mystery, but it's not contradiction.
Well, the way we understand the universe, it appears to be a contradiction. But if we say, oh well, we simply don't know it, then we just basically ignore it and just by faith assume that it's not contradictory.
That's not what we do. Logic leads us to the incommunicability of God. Now we have to ultimately end up in mystery, but that's not contradiction. Logic tells us, again, that we're not self-existent. Logic tells us that there must be a more at least bipersonal individual, because there's relationality, there's love. And so these are the things that we can lead to, but ultimately, because it's incommunicable, because it is pure being, it does not predicate at all. It must be something that we cannot fully grasp, but we can apprehend it.
Well, I think you're just trying to fit your theology in. Again, why can't new
I'm trying to be logical here, and you start at the very ground level saying I don't know, and I give answers and answer.
Why do relationships always have to be?
Because that's what the nature of them are, Floyd.
The nature of a relationship comes about when there are more than one entities to have a relationship. If that isn't the case, then there's no relationship. Why is relationships necessary?
Well,
something that emerges when you have more than one being. Okay, then now you can have a relationship between more than one being. If you just have one being, besides having a relationship with itself, you don't have any other relationship. Why is that a problem?
Okay, so relationship requires it's a personal property, right?
Well, a personal relationship, yeah.
Okay, and so
we talked about left, right, up and down, and so forth. We wouldn't call that that's a relationship, but we wouldn't call that a personal relationship.
Okay, but when we're talking about relationality, we're talking about a personal characteristic of relationship. And if God is only a strict monotheism, you don't have there's nothing to relate to for himself.
Right.
So relationality is a sham.
Well, no, it just doesn't exist at that point.
That's right.
Yeah. Right. So why is that a
relationality? Let me ask you this: is relationality an accidental property for God?
An accidental property of God? It wouldn't be a property of God until he creates.
That's right. So he's not fully God. If that relationality is something that's part of God, he's not fully God until something happens and he is composed. Something composes him as a relational being, and therefore he's not God.
I don't follow that at all. Is it necessary for God to create anything?
I cannot. That's something that I'm not willing to wade in. To speak of the life of God outside of creation. I don't even think I can speculate that. I don't know. I just have to say I don't know.
How are you able to speculate or declare that relationality is a necessary part of God?
I am postulating via causalitatis. I'm looking at the causal nature of this nature, and I am extrapolating back what is necessary to have what we have today.
Okay, well, today we have relationships.
That's
okay.
Right.
Right. So why was it necessary for God to always be in a relationship with something?
Because relationality must be a part of who he is. And I shouldn't say a part. It must be definitional to who he is. If it's not, then he doesn't have it. He's not God, because something had to give him that part. Potentiality is just potentiality is actualized by something. If relationality is a potential for God, then there must be something that actualizes that in his life. And if that's the case, then he's not God. It's whatever gave him that potential, to actualize that potentiality. That's what is God.
On day three, did God have the potential to create humans on day 6?
No, because God is timeless.
So he didn't have that potential.
And he has no potential. If he has any potential whatsoever, then he's not God.
By whose definition? Yours?
By what is logically necessary.
Again, why is that logically necessary?
Because if God does not possess something, then he is not self-existent. He is contingent, and he has the potential for that, but something outside of him must actualize that reality of whatever it is in him. And it's also an accidental property, and therefore, if it's not definitional to who he is, here's what simplicity is: nothing outside of God makes God to be God. He is simple deity in and of himself. He has all the attributes that he has in perfection. For us, it's not a perfection. Happiness for you, Floyd, is not a perfection. Or joy or anger. Those are accidental properties. Those are things, those are states of being in which this is the impassibility argument. This is, you move from one state to another, and you move as your life because you are acted upon by something outside of you, which causes you to either embrace it or recoil it. And you have that particular property, but that's not who you are. But for God, he must be defined by those things. Those are who he is. He is the perfection. That's the via. I forget what it's called. The perfection. It's one of the ways of Thomas's love. But
again, we don't see this in the Bible at all. We see this God changing attitudes. We just
made it up. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, the God of the Bible is not the God of the philosophers. You're asserting Greek thought into the Bible where it's just not there.
No. Were the Greek gods passable? Oh, good grief. Were the Greek gods passable, or the Roman gods?
Well, I mean, some of them were created, and so
that's right. And they fought, and they hated each other, and they moved from one state to the next. There's nothing in common on that level with the God of Christianity. That's why Thomas took a lot of Aristotle's thinking, but he refined it and changed it. So it's not the God of philosophy. So, for example, some Christians will say they don't like my using the contingency argument because they say, oh, well, the God of Aristotle our God is so much more than that. If you maybe heard R.C. Sproul say that, and he says, yes, our God is so much more than the God of Aristotle, but he is not less. And also, Thomas made some changes to his concept as well.
So again, why can't God simply have the potential to create relationships as he created anything else?
Because he's giving something he does not possess in and of himself. Would you agree with that?
No, the essence of threeness or fourness comes about when you have four things. Before that, you don't have that. So again, you're saying that this is back to my original point. It seems like you're saying that anything that exists must always exist, must have always exist. Nothing new can come about. That seems
no,
what
I'm saying that you, Floyd, came about. I'm saying that all contingent creation came about. It's not necessary. It's not that we have a different ontology than God. There is change. Change is real.
Right. So change came from non-change. Physical came from non-physical. Right.
Yes, because physical is contingent. Would you agree with that?
Oh, no, not necessarily.
Physicality is self-existence?
It could be. Why not?
Because it's limited by space. How can, if it's self-existent, how could it be affected by space?
It's part of space. The universe is a space-time continuum.
Right. And
Right.
corporeality is limited by space. Do you agree with it?
But it's always in flux.
Okay. Right. It's always changing. Change is a mark of contingency, right?
Change is a mark of contingency. I don't think so.
For something to change, this is what we used to argue, and you never seem to be able to get it.
No.
If something is changing, it is dependent upon that which is enacting the change, that which is bringing a new level of actuality. Whatever is turning that potentiality into actuality, it must be coming from something outside itself.
No, that's wrong. This is where we had this argument before. No, you're wrong. It's something can change within. Something has the potential to change within. And we see that with the God of the Bible.
No.
So again, your God changes. Your God changes all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Did we not talk about that?
And the minute he creates something, a new relationship forms, and then he's contingent on that relationship.
Oh, then he's contingent by definition.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there's no such thing as self-existent, and everything.
No, self-existent only means that nothing else created. What happens afterward? What happens afterwards? It doesn't.
Afterwards is time a measurement of change, Floyd?
Yes.
Okay, and so change is a necessary property.
Does God work within time?
He is not subject to it. So the change that we see is the Cambridge property.
Was Jesus always a physical human being?
No, his humanity is contingent.
Right.
One person, two natures. So no.
But his person changed, right?
No, on the level of person, he did not change. On the level of humanity, mind, will, and emotions, yes, those were added accidents to Christ, the Son.
They're added later, so a new relationship in his personhood change, right, came about.
No, there was a change in an act. Do you know what a Cambridge property is?
No.
Cambridge property is a change that enacts, but is not. Say, for example, if both of us are standing in the same room, and let's say I died, there was a change that occurred. That change occurred, but it did not necessarily mark a change in you, but there was a change that occurred. And that's how it is with God in the universe. He enacts change, but it does not affect him. It does not bring him into a new potential or to a new actuality of existence that he did not have before. But for us, it is. There is a true change that happens, but it's a change on our part, not on God's.
Right. So if you died, our relationship would be different. That's why if you came about, a new relationship would come about. And that's what I've been pointing out. You could have a single God with no relationships. The minute something else existed, he would have relationships.
No, it's not a relationship that is something that he in himself is affected by. He effects or he affects things, but he is not, how's that word go? There is an effect that is changed, but he is not affected by it. If he is affected by it, then he himself is not self-existent by definition. He's dependent.
No, again, I don't agree with your definition of self-existent. Self-existent only means that nothing created it.
Okay,
nothing, and it says nothing about. Besides that, it says nothing about his nature.
Well, sure it does.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, his nature is not. His nature can be composite, and he can be self-existent.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so listen. Well, you got all these parts that make up God. Okay,
right.
And he's not God until all these parts come together and make God, right?
No, there are no parts coming together.
Well, you just said that there were. You got all these parts that are God.
No, that assumes that they were separate, and then later they came together.
Right.
There's no need for that.
Oh, there's not.
No.
So can you take one of those parts away, and God will still be God?
Can you take a part away? I don't know.
Well, that's what I say. You can't. If you're going to have parts, then you've got to have a composer, because you had the parts that had to come together. It's not what it is.
No, it's self-existent.
Okay, if it's self-existent, then it cannot be made up of parts, because it had to happen. The parts had to be assembled in order to make it what it was, and therefore
they were never assembled to begin with.
Okay, so these parts represent God, well, actually, explain this to me. What do you mean by parts?
Different entities, like the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Okay, so that would be what's called partialism. So the Father is not God until he comes together with the Spirit and the Son, right?
Comes together. I'm not sure what that means.
Well, you said he's a distinct part, right?
Well, not in Trinitarianism, no.
Well, you're defining him, because I'm saying a simple God, but you're saying that God is not. God is made up of parts. You're saying Father, Son, and Spirit are not God until they come together, right?
You could have a reality where there's one God that's only made of one part. You could have a reality where there's multiple gods that are self-existent.
Oh, okay. So each one of those gods, we've already talked about this several times.
Yeah.
So each one of those gods has identity differences from the other gods. Would that be correct?
They could be identical, like identical triplets or whatever.
If there's no ontological difference, then they're the same.
Well,
can those gods interact with each other?
They could, or they don't have to.
Okay, if they interacted with each other, then one would act upon another, and the one that was acted upon would be contingent, and he would not be the perfection of what he was, because he had a weakness, because the one that acted upon him had a greater property other than the other God.
What greater property is that?
Whichever one that allowed him to be able to act upon the weaker one.
Why do I have to allow? If someone's yelling in my ear, am I allowing them to yell in my ear?
You're being affected by them, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, certainly, yeah.
Okay. If you're being affected by them, then you are contingent to that which is acting upon you. You're contingent to the person screaming at you because you're receiving the action, right?
Right. I pointed this out to you last time, where an interaction between God and one of his creatures, and they're going back and forth, back and forth. I forget who it was. I think it was Moses. I think it was. God is reacting, is being affected by Moses's questions and demands and so forth.
Yes, God wants to destroy the Israelites, and Moses says, "You cannot do that, God. Do not do that." And God responds to Moses.
Right,
but how else do you want him to respond to them? I mean, if there's
is he being affected? Is he reacting? Is he being affected? I would say so.
That would be called an improper attribution to God, and it would be called an ad extra relationship that God has. There's a way that God relates into himself, and there's a way that God relates to his creation. The way he relates to himself has no potential whatsoever. The way he relates to us must be marked by potential. Otherwise, we could have no way of communication, because we are creatures of potential.
Well, so you're saying that, so when God reacts or relates to us, he doesn't have potential. All potentials on our side.
Yes, He cannot have potential within himself, because then something must be giving him the actuality that he does not possess.
Again, why does someone else need to give him that potential? Why can't he have the potential to begin with?
It's potential by definition, Floyd. It's something he does not have. So it's got to be given to him. It's not actual. So if it's something that he potentially has, he doesn't have it, right?
Well, a child has a potential to reach adolescence. Did someone give him that, or was it just part of his nature?
Received it. Did he not receive his adolescence?
From whom?
Through the biological processes that occur in his body, and those can be blocked, and he is dependent upon that. If he's not given that which he needs to be, that actuality, he doesn't have it, right?
Well, he can be affected by that, right? But
he is affected. That's right.
But his nature itself, it has potential to come about. You know, we're not closed. Right. We're not a closed system. We're not a closed system. But his biological nature has that potential in itself.
That's right. It has the potential. It does
not
have
so why can't God, through his own nature, have the potential to lower himself to become Jesus the human?
Well, he can do that. He can accommodate himself by taking on an additional nature. But he and of himself is not, his ontology cannot be changed by anything that he does. If he does, then he's dependent upon that which is bringing this new state of being within him.
Well, I know we see that all the time in the Bible.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And we keep going back to this, that God expresses himself through anthropomorphism and anthropopathism.
Oh, no, you just want to try to make things figuratively. You know, that's figurative.
There's no figurative speech in the Bible? You just told me something. What was the example you used?
Well, there is figurative speech, but we're talking about the ontological nature of your God here.
That's right, and it must be
communicated and your God changes attitudes. He performs different things at different times. He reacts to humans and so forth. Again, your God of Sproul and Aquinas and Augustine is not the God of the Bible. You're not really following the God of the Bible.
You're a genius, Floyd. You know that?
Yeah.
2,000 years, well, let's say 1,300 years of church history, and Floyd comes along and says, simplicity. He changes. It's okay to change and be perfect. Oh, no big deal. And we're all going, wow, this guy's something. I'm going to get a lot of trouble for laughing there.
Well, if he's perfect, why did he, again, we're back to, if he's perfect, why did he have the need to create it all?
I didn't say he had a need. Did I say he had a need?
Well, why did he create? If he's perfect?
Because his choice.
Why does your God desire to have people with him?
Well, it's not out of a lack, but he certainly has that prerogative to choose.
Right, so he has some sort of desire.
So volition necessarily.
Is he lacking? Like in was it Second Peter?
No.
Then why does he desire that? Does he desire?
I don't know. I cannot speak to the ad infra nature of God.
You don't know. You don't know now.
What do you mean now? When did I ever say that I knew the mind of God?
Well, we have all these things that I'm bringing up, and you're just saying I don't know.
I am saying there's a point.
But you're perfectly clear to say God is,
because wherever logic leads me, I must go there, Floyd. But
I don't see the logic, and again, I don't see how any of these things apply to the Bible.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
it's not possible to extrapolate from our existence and think about things metaphysical, because we want to be atheists, and we must protect that no matter what.
No, I'm more than happy if there's good reasons to believe in God.
Good grief. You've never dominated a conversation, Floyd. Not once. Now I'm going to get a lot of trouble for that as well. But come on. You're not dominating this conversation now either, as much as you would like to.
I don't want to dominate conversation.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not much of a talker.
Yeah, you just want to find truth, right?
Well, I try. I mean, everyone has biases, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And we all have weaknesses, and we all need to keep open minds.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. Okay, well, why don't we kind of close this one down? I've still got some work to do before I go home.
Okay.
And I appreciate your charity, Floyd. I I get kind of frustrated because I feel like, especially on the change issue, it's just like we've gone around and around about this, and I'm like, and somehow to you it doesn't seem to make sense, but it seems to make perfect sense to me. But I appreciate your charity, and I appreciate, actually, this was a very thoughtful discussion. I mean, this was kind of like a Bert Poole discussion. Bert would always give really great discussions, and thoughtful. And I didn't think it was going to be this thoughtful. So I thank you for that, and I'm sure the rabble will be all riled, and some person in Cincinnati will probably be talking about this tomorrow on his program. So anyway, with that, I will give you my thanks, Floyd, and bid you adieu for the evening. And I'm sure we'll talk again. Okay.
All right. Thank you, and keep that beard.
All right, man. Thanks. We'll see you.
All right. Bye now.